Hi, and welcome to the Feet of Jesus, where we are going through the entire Bible, one book at a time, and we're in the book of Acts. We are using this workbook, and we're on Acts 25. But before we get into Acts and our work for this week, I have two bits of really big ministry news to tell you about, and I'm just so excited I can hardly stand it. So, first of all, we have our next book we are going to study. It is ready to go. It is ready to purchase on Amazon. Would you like to see it? Okay, here it is. So, at the feet of Jesus, quiet times in the book of Genesis. So we are going to the very beginning, and I am so excited to get this done and get this going with you. So I have to tell you, I studied Genesis nearly twice in order to read this or put this together for you, because I did and formatted it exactly like we have been doing through the New Testament. And then I went to my pastor saying, I'm actually, while I'm studying for the book of Genesis, a little bit discouraged. I've read Genesis before, but not several times, but not in this really detailed way that you and I tend to go through these books. And so he said, there's a reason for that. He said, when you are going through the New Testament, pull it up close. So really get into the details. When you're studying the Old Testament, sometimes it's handy to pull it away. So he suggested a systematic theology type of approach to the Old Testament. So that is what we're doing. So we are pulling Genesis away from us a little bit and seeing large chunks and pulling main themes and that type of thing into those chunks. I will explain more when we get to Genesis, which is just in a few weeks, but I am so excited. So get the book now. It's on Amazon. I will put a link for both books in the description this time. So let's get to Acts 25. Wait a minute. I was also going to tell you the other big news for the ministry. So the other big news is that I have been working for about 2 years on a podcast. If by chance you are on my Facebook page or on Instagram with the ministry, you've been seeing that we've been teasing about what we're about to do, and it goes live on Tuesday. But you watching this video get the first actual knowledge of what we've been working on and what we've been teasing for the last week. It is a podcast. It's called Graceful Stories, Living and Learning That God's Got This. So the whole idea is amazing. God has blessed this ministry tremendously by having amazing stories come forward. So Graceful is capital GRACE -FULL. So it's a funky spelling of graceful because these stories are full of grace. They're amazing. So the very first episode is me. It's the story that got all of this ministry started. The second story is my son who battles epilepsy. The third story is already done, and it's about child abuse and enduring child abuse. And this amazing woman came forward to be a part of that story. So please look forward to that on Tuesday, and I am so excited to get that going. Now it is time to do Acts 25. So let me get into it first, and we'll try to go through just a few minutes of an overview. What we have is Paul is about to appeal to Caesar. So you have Felix that was in Acts 24, and then Felix leaves his post as governor and Festus comes in. Felix really was a bad guy. We've talked about him before, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. But then Festus comes back. Josephus, that ancient historian, he tells us that Festus was a whole lot better. Not perfect, but a whole lot better. So it's kind of interesting. At the beginning of this, I want to review something from Acts 9:15. I found my place, so if you want to find it, just pause me and then come back. It says, then Ananias answered, Lord, I'm at 13. We'll just start from 13. Lord, I have heard from many that about this man, how much harm he has done to your saints. Now this is Ananias talking to God about Paul. How much harm he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priests to bind all who call on your name. But the Lord said to him, go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine to bear my name before Gentiles. Did he do that? Mm-hmm. Kings, he's about to, and the children of Israel. For I will show him how many things he must suffer for my name's sake. So here we are in this Acts 25. He will have shared the gospel with Felix, who is a governor, Festus, who is a governor, and King Herod II, who is a king. So God totally has this under control. So that's what he does first. And that's the first part of Acts 25. In Acts 25:11, 10 and 11. So what Festus has done is Festus has decided he really wants to be in with the Jewish leadership in Jerusalem. So he has told them that he's going to try to get Paul back to Jerusalem. Well, what do they want to do to Paul in Jerusalem? They want to kill him. And so whether or not Festus really knows that, I don't know. But Festus thinks he's going to help his new Jewish friends and get this done. And then Paul, the courage that this man has, he just hands it to Festus. And really, I want to try to read verses 10 and 11 to you in what I think was kind of the attitude Paul was doing. So Festus in verse 9 says, Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? And then here comes Paul, verse 10. So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews, I have done no wrong, as you very well know. For I am an offender. For I am an offender, or have committed. Let's try this again. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is anything in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. So he can do that as a Roman citizen. And so that is his ticket to Rome. We'll talk about that more when we get into the verses. So then we have Paul before Agrippa. So Agrippa comes. So let me get into who Herod Agrippa II is. Let's get into that. So Herod Agrippa II, his dad is the one in Acts 12 who dies in that Colosseum. Remember the bugs and stuff. Go back to Acts 12 if you don't remember it. It's crazy awful. And so that is his father. And Herod Agrippa II was only 17 when his father died. And so since he was so young, the powers that be decided maybe he was too young to take the kingship. And so they divided the kingdom into governorships. We know 3 of them. We know Pilate, we know Felix, we know Festus, until he was old enough to really take over. So Herod Agrippa's dad, the first, as I said, was the one who died in Acts 12. He was Herod Agrippa the First. He is also the one that had James beheaded. His grandfather was Herod Antipas, and he's the one who had John the Baptist's head cut off in that horrible, horrible show with his stepdaughter. And so his great-grandfather is the one who killed all the babies in Bethlehem. So this is a crazy group of people that ran the whole area, that were the kings of the area, and horrible people. And he is actually the last one in the Herodian dynasty. So here we go. When he appeals to Caesar, you know who he's appealing to? He is appealing to Caesar Nero. Now, Caesar Nero was a madman. He was probably one of the worst of the Caesars. I did some research for you, aren't you lucky, on the atrocities that King Nero did. Now, this is from an article titled Roman Emperor Nero, the Ultimate Drunken Megalomaniac. Lords of the Drinks is the website. So this is what it says. It says, as the years went by, Nero got more paranoid and violent. He had his stepbrother killed, and later his wife Octavia, who was also his stepsister, and his mother. The Roman emperor also killed his new wife Sabina, the love of his life, when she told him she was pregnant when Nero was already drunk. He kicked her in the belly, and with that, he didn't just kill the unborn baby, but accidentally killed his wife. So when he killed his wife, it was a really tough blow to this guy because he actually killed someone he really, really loved. And so he got a slave boy and made the slave boy pretend to be his wife. That's who Caesar Nero is, and that's who Paul has appealed to. So one other interesting fact, when we're getting into Agrippa, this is Herod Agrippa II. This is the young king. He wants to hear Paul's story. And so starting in verse 23, it says, so the next day when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at Festus's command, Paul was brought in. So there's all this pomp and circumstance, and it's this big showy thing. One thing that's just an interesting thing to keep in mind, whenever Herod Agrippa II is mentioned, it's always mentioned that his sister Bernice was with him. There is nothing that is absolutely proven, but there's a lot of belief that Bernice and Agrippa had an incestual relationship. It's a crazy, crazy thing. So anyway, that is mostly what I wanted to get at with Acts 25 as an overview. So let me put my Bible aside and let's pull out our verses from our workbook. Okay, the first one, so we have 3 verses, and so I think we're going to touch on all 3. The first one was Acts 25:11. It says, if, however, I am guilty of doing anything deserving of death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. We read that, different version, but we read that. So this is my thought. You know, this is 2 years in. This is 2 years, actually, I think even a little bit more, since the Jews really put the scheme together to kill him. And we read it in Acts 24 and 23. And so it's at least 2 years, because it's 2 years between Acts 24 and Acts 25. So the Jews planned and schemed to kill Paul. And this was only their latest scheme to get it done. And you know, all they were trying to do was circumvent God's will, to circumvent God's plan. And you know what? It failed. It failed in glorious, huge, giant fashion. So God will have his way. God will have his way. All we need to do as the children of God is to relax and know that God's will be done. God will have his way. And we just need to have less worry, knowing that God wants what's best for us. And sometimes what's best for us and for his plan isn't always how we wanted it. Did Paul want to go to Rome? Absolutely. Was Paul thinking he was going to go to Rome in chains? Probably not. But it was Paul's biggest desire to go to Rome, and he did get it done. And that's going to bring me to the next verse. We're going to get to several points I want to get at with this actually being an amazingly wonderful thing that Paul got to go to Rome. So the next verse is Acts 25:19. This is the verse. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus who Paul claimed was alive. Okay, this is Festus talking. Okay, this is someone that does not have any emotion involved in this whole dispute. So let's read it again. Instead, they have some points, they, the Jews, have some points of dispute about him, Paul, about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus who Paul claims was alive. So this is what I got out of that. What I got out of it was that this was a pretty clearly defined issue. The Jews hated Paul. They had some disputes, some religious disputes with him about a dead guy named Jesus who Paul says is alive. You know, when you boil down, and even in our own lives, so this is my application, when you boil this point down, all this hatred that they had for Paul, when you boil all of that down and you get rid of all the hate and all the emotion out of it, the issues are pretty well defined. Let's go over the things that we know because of what we're hearing. One, we know that the Jews' argument was baseless, right? Yeah. Two, we know that God will make good out of Satan's havoc. Amen. I wonder how many times God has made good out of the havoc Satan has caused in your life. I know he's done a lot of it in mine. And number three, the Jews' hatred was just downright silly. It was silly. So look at those points that I've just pointed out. Isn't number three correct? Isn't hatred, the hatred that the Jews had, wasn't it silly? And I'm using silly as a word that truly means childish and baseless and ridiculous. It really, really was. When we harbor ill will, I have a question. Do you think our ill will and our bitterness that we might be harboring for other people, do you think that looks silly? If you were to strip all the emotion away, do you think it looks silly? And sometimes I think it does. I don't know. I can tell you from my life and the bitterness I have had for people over the years, it was silly. For me, I can't talk for you. But last verse, Acts 25:27. For I think it is unreasonable to send a prisoner on to Rome without specifying the charges against him. So there was no reason whatsoever for Paul to be arrested. They could find no fault in him. Yet God willed for Paul to go to Rome, and he did. You know, we may not always understand God's plan and God's will, but God does. And I started making this point 2 verses ago, but we just need to make peace that God will always be looking out for our good, even in death. So this is the point I want to make. Let's look at John 11:35. It is the shortest Bible verse in the Bible. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. And so I bet you there are several people who are shouting out the two words that make up this verse. So again, we're on John 11:35. So here we go. One more page for me. Okay, Jesus wept. Okay, so let me explain where I'm going on this. So first of all, this is Mary and Martha, and their brother had died, and they pleaded for Jesus to go in and for Jesus to heal him. And above that, it says in verse 33, therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And then verse 35, Jesus wept. I'll be honest, as a Christian, I've always thought that Jesus wept because his friend died. And you know what? It is absolutely possible that is the reason Jesus wept. But I'm going to give you a what if. And this is Heather's what if. This is not any kind of authority coming from me, but this is my perspective. What if Jesus knew in his omnipotence, his power, and his knowledge, he knew that his friend was dead. And he knew that he was going to go in there and bring him back to life. What if Jesus was weeping because he was going to have to bring him back from paradise? With that perspective, we cannot go into these last verses in Acts feeling horribly sad for Paul. At the end of Acts, Paul is in paradise. Paul is celebrating at the feet of Jesus. He is reaping the rewards for his work. He is right where he's always wanted to be since the Damascus Road experience. So we cannot go through a whole lot of this being sad that Paul does get executed at the end of Acts. I am going to do some research and find out some more about how he was executed and what pain he may have experienced through it. But Jesus wept. And I think Jesus wept because his friend was going to come back to earth who had been in paradise. And you know what? So we can celebrate. We can celebrate for Paul. We can celebrate for all those people, even the people that we love that are now dancing with Jesus. They are in paradise. And as children of God, that's what we get to look forward to. So what are we going to put at the feet of Jesus this week? We are going to put hate and bitterness that can fester in us. We are going to put the will of God. Goodness gracious, we're going to put that at the feet of Jesus, and we're going to just let Jesus handle what he will with our own fear and our own worry. And we're going to just let him help us get at his feet and let his will be done in our lives. So friends, come and celebrate with us on this new podcast and come with us and enjoy the ride. We're going to learn some amazing things on this podcast. So remember, the name is Graceful Stories, living and learning that God's got this. And as I say with everything I finish, you know what? We know that God's got this because we've lived that God's got this. Love you, friends.